Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Westside Unitarian Universalist Church service in person here on the church grounds and being streamed live on Zoom. So hello to you people out there attending via Zoom as well. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Linda Phippen. My pronouns are she, her, hers. As a member of the worship committee, I will be assisting with today's service. We're very happy you're here to join us. Whether you're a longtime member and a friend of Westside or whether this is your first time. If you are here for the first time, we do usually linger for a while after the service to check in with each other and see how we're all doing. So please feel free to stay around after the service. We'd love to get the chance to meet you. One thing about today, the sign back here with the big thumbs up on it, that's our bathroom access sign. So if you need to use the restroom, as you go, it's one person at a time in the restroom. So flip the sign over as you go in, and you come back out, flip it to the other side so we know when the bathroom is available. So before we get started, I do have a few announcements. Just as a reminder, our Share the Plate partner for this quarter is CASA, which stands for Court-Appointed Special Advocates, whose volunteers assist children in the legal system. There is a box for donations, which is over here on the blue chair, the last blue chair in line over here. And a portion of all donations do go to CASA as our Share the Plate partner. Ongoing, we have Religious Exploration, which is a discussion group that meets Thursday evenings via Zoom at 6:30. And the Zoom link for that group is on the members area of the Westside website. Lastly, the fall retreat at Pickett State Park will be November 5th through 7th. If you are planning to attend and haven't let us know yet, please let Reverend Carol know ASAP. Does anyone else have any announcements they would like to make? Okay. Today, we will be remembering and reflecting on that fateful day 20 years ago. I'm sure many of you, at least those of you who are old enough to remember, have been thinking about where you were and what you were doing on that Tuesday morning and the event that shocked the world and set so many things in motion and that still reverberates today. As we approach this moment and of remembrance and reflection, I invite you to settle into this moment, gather your thoughts, focus your attention as Reverend Carol sounds the Tibetan singing bowl.
Yesterday in the memorials that were held in Washington, D.C., and in Pennsylvania and in New York City, they sounded gongs at the specific moments that particular things happened on September 11th of 2001. So this morning, our bowl has a little extra significance. Let us allow it to help us sink into a state of deep reverence.
Bridget Ross is going to be lighting the chalice this morning. Our chalice lighting words today are entitled Chalice Lighting for Challenging Times and come from Lisa Doge. They were written specifically for 9/11, but they also resonate during our current challenging time. Why a flaming chalice, the question comes. It's the cup of life, we answer. A cup of blessings overflowing, a cup of water to quench our spirit's thirst, a cup of wine for for celebration and dedication, the flame of truth, the fire of purification, oil for anointing, healing. Out of chaos, fear, and horror, thus was the symbol crafted a generation ago. So may it be for us in these days of uncertainty and a light to warm our souls and guide us home.
Thanks, Linda. For those of you I haven't had a chance to meet yet, welcome. I'm Reverend Carol Bedeau, and I'm privileged to serve here as minister. My pronouns are she, her, and hers. We're going to light a special candle this morning before we do anything else. Those of you who have been at Westside a long time will remember Chuck and Jane Flanagan, who have been key people in this community, even though they haven't been attending here the last few years. Chuck and Jane are a part of the fabric of Westside. And many of you will know that Chuck passed just a few days ago. So we're going to light a candle just in memory of Chuck and all of the legacy of cheer and reflection and wisdom that his life leaves with us. So this is a rough time in the world, isn't it, folks? It's a rough time. I don't know about you, but I know when I realized that I was going to be speaking about the anniversary of 9/11, I really struggled with that. What in the world? I was visiting my parents and I said, what in the world am I going to say? I've been feeling raw, as many of us have, not just because of this anniversary, but because of the situation in our world. I know that my heart is hurting quite a lot right now. There's a lot of fear, uncertainty, pain. Those things generate a lot of struggle and strife in the world, in our society. We've got a lot of judgment and fear and blame and divisiveness and anger going on. And so I'm not really at all sure that we have any easy answers to any of that. So yesterday, I did my morning yoga and meditation, knowing I was going to need to write because I'd been avoiding writing. So I did my morning yoga and my meditation, and then I decided to take my little bowl of yogurt and go sit in front of the television. I did that quite unconsciously, but I sat down at about 9:40 and I turned on the television, and I found myself watching the memorials from New York and Washington and Pennsylvania for the 9/11 victims. And like most of you, who were around at that time and old enough to remember, I remember exactly where I was and what I was doing that day. And yesterday I found myself watching this on television just exactly as I did 20 years ago, sitting in front of the television. We watched that drama play out live in our homes. So as I was watching at exactly the time that they would pause at each location and sound the gongs for specific things. The first tower, the South Tower, collapsed at 9:59 a.m. Flight 93 crashed into a field in Shanksville, Pennsylvania at 10:03 a.m. The North Tower collapsed at 10:28 a.m. Now, yesterday watching that, I remember 20 years ago, I was in shock, but yesterday I wept uncontrollably for like an hour. I just sat there and cried. I couldn't stop crying. So as I've been thinking about today and preparing for the service, these words kept going through my mind. These are the times that try men's souls. And I've just had them in the background. And I started thinking about other moments of national crisis. So Some of them that come to my mind are the American Revolution, the Civil War, the Indian Removal Act of 1836 and the Trail of Tears, the assassinations of John F. Kennedy, Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., Robert Kennedy, Malcolm X. Think about Vietnam and Korea, the murder of George Floyd, and our current pandemic, and all the political things going with it. These are all moments when crisis has defined not just our personal lives, but our public lives and our collective narrative. So watching those memorials yesterday, I was struck by the parallels between President Abraham Lincoln's address in November of 1863 on the battlefield of Gettysburg, Pennsylvania, and the memorial addresses being given on a field 2 hours away in Shanksville, Pennsylvania. Like, it had never occurred to me before watching it. They were just 2 hours from Gettysburg. And so that flight 93, where those brave passengers took down their own plane rather than allow it to be used as a weapon against the nation, kept that part of it kept making me think about parallels in the past and the present. And that's not the only parallel. The language being used yesterday in all of those memorials matched language from speeches given at other moments in history about similar crises. So there are words about honoring those who have died, about remaining strong in the face of challenge, and about living more fully into our values. Past President George W. Bush, who was the president at the time of the terrorist attacks, spoke at Shanksville yesterday. He spoke about how recent rhetoric has been divisive. And he contrasted this rhetoric with the unifying spirit that we saw in the months after 9/11, 2001. Vice President Kamala Harris echoed these same feelings. She said that not only is unity possible in America, she said it's imperative. And she said, by unity, I do not mean uniformity. She stressed that we had differences in 2001, just as we do now, but that fear being used to sow divisiveness weakens us all. Past President Bush and current Vice President Harris both stressed that the nation we know, this is their words, the nation we know is one with the spirit of unification, willing to overcome differences to strive together toward a common good. So the phrase that I said, that I keep hearing in my own head, is these are the times that try men's souls. And I will admit that my understanding of the origin of that quote was a little bit shaky. I knew it was late 18th century. Where I learned that quote, which is actually, you'll see it if you look around, you'll find it in all kinds of contemporary references, all kinds of references since the late 1700s. Where I learned it was from a musical that my school did when I was in 6th grade. And the musical was called Let George Do It. And it was about George Washington. And the words from that musical, from one of the songs in that musical, were this: it's times like these that try men's souls, when summer's gone and winter's due. Oh, summer soldier, stay a while and see the winter through. So I kept hearing that, and I decided, it would be the responsible thing to do to look it up. And where that comes from is a pamphlet, the first of a series of pamphlets written by Thomas Paine, who was the author of Common Sense and was a key instigator of the American Revolution. The pamphlet this is from a pamphlet that was written in December of 1763 called The American Crisis. So these words originally referred to the American Revolution, but they reverberate today just as they would through history. They've been used at other times. They reverberate as we think about 9/11 and also as we think about what's happening right now. 'Tis surprising to see how rapidly a panic will sometimes run through a country. All nations and ages have been subject to them. Yet panics, in some cases, have their uses. They produce as much good as hurt. Their duration is always short. The mind grows through them and acquires a firmer habit than before. But their peculiar advantage is that they are the touchstones of sincerity and of hypocrisy, and bring things and men to light which might otherwise have lain forever undiscovered. So in the past, when I've thought about that line, these are the times that try men's souls, I've sort of unconsciously interpreted it to mean these times stink. They stress us out. They make us upset. They're trying. But that isn't actually what Thomas Paine meant. What he meant is that times of crisis are times that test and temper us. They reveal who we really are and how willing we are to live our values. He goes on later in the pamphlet. He says, I love that man that can smile in trouble, that can gather strength from distress and grow brave by reflection. 'Tis the business of little minds to shrink, but he whose heart is firm and whose conscience approves his conduct will pursue his principles unto death. So I couldn't help but think yesterday that Thomas Paine would have approved of the passengers of Flight 93, of the first responders who went up the stairs, of the soldiers and the citizens who went into danger to try to rescue and recover those trapped in the Pentagon and the towers. Now, the speakers yesterday echoed these sentiments, Thomas Paine's sentiments, honoring the ways that people responded, not from their fear, not by shrinking, but by being brave and honorable and giving their all for their values. Like Abraham Lincoln speaking in 1863 on that other field in Pennsylvania, at Gettysburg, where 7,000 died and 42,000 were injured. Paine was speaking not about the harm done in the crisis, but about the good possible in our response to crisis. This is what Lincoln said. We cannot dedicate, we cannot consecrate, we cannot hallow this ground. The brave men, living and dead, who struggled here have consecrated it, far above our poor power to add or detract. It is for us, the living, rather, to be dedicated here to the unfinished work, which they who fought here have thus far so nobly advanced. It is rather for us to be here dedicated to the great task remaining before us, that from these honored dead we take increased devotion to that cause for which they gave the last full measure of devotion, that we here highly resolve that these dead shall not have died in vain. Speaking yesterday on a field in Pennsylvania, Gordon Felt, who is the president of the Families of Flight 93 organization and brother of Flight 93 passenger Edward Felt, asked these questions, and I'm going to paraphrase him. He said, are we worthy of their sacrifice? Do we conduct ourselves in a manner that would make them proud of who we've become? Do we share their willingness to act bravely and to accomplish a noble goal? Do we cherish the hard-earned freedoms we enjoy? He reiterated, as did past President Bush and Vice President Harris, this idea of unity. He reiterated the Latin phrase, e pluribus unum, out of many one, which is the motto of the United States. Do we live up to this, he asked, or do we let fear drive us to division? And it seems like these questions are the questions that human beings have to ask to make sense of crisis. We can't just stay with our feelings of helplessness and hopelessness and pain and fear. That's not possible for us to function if we stay in that place. We have to ask questions to produce forward motion. Thomas Paine says, "'Tis surprising to see how rapidly a panic will sometimes run through a country." It's also surprising how quickly these crises and panics run from actual events that we feel in our bodies into things that are stories to us. I know a lot of people for whom 9/11 is just a story. There are lots and lots of people who have absolutely no memory of where they were that day. They were too young or they weren't born yet. So when I was a child, my elders actually remembered the assassinations of the 1960s. But to me, they were just stories. I was born in 66. They were things that I could tell mattered to my parents, but I don't remember them. So those stories and what we tell about what happens matters. In a movie about the Flight 93 heroes, the wife of one of the men who died in that crash actually described how her husband had a high regard for the soldiers at Gettysburg, and how he would praise the way those soldiers wrote notes to their loved ones and pinned them on trees before going into battle. That's like those final phone calls of those Flight 93 passengers. People saying, "I love my family at home. I value my life. I treasure what I have. I'm willing to do what I have to do to protect it." And so we have to ask the question, what stories are we telling about the crises we live in? Because it's not going to be very long before they're just stories. I know it doesn't feel like that, but there are many people now for whom it's just a story. When I was a little girl, many of you have heard me talk about how the next door neighbor was my neighbor, Grandma Marion. When the pandemic first started, I realized she was in high school when that happened in 1918 to 1920, the Spanish flu pandemic. She lived through that. She never once mentioned it because World War I and World War II and the Civil Rights era had all come in between that story and when I showed up for her to tell stories. So I do not mean to minimize anything, right? I don't mean to minimize our current social or political or economic or environmental crises. And I don't mean to glorify war or violence. And I don't mean to justify any unacceptable actions in the name of patriotism. I don't mean any of that. I don't mean to praise the apotheosis, which is a fancy word for making a myth out of something. I don't mean to praise making myths out of toxic national behaviors or the colonial agenda. I don't mean any of that. But faced with crisis, humans need some way to move forward. So what I mean to say is this: perhaps we have the choice to decide how we respond in times like these. What are the core values we hold? And how do we live them? Are we living up to the memory of others who, from all sorts of different social, economic, political, and cultural locations, have sacrificed enormously to provide and protect our privileges? Here's the thing: when we are hurting, it's really easy to see how others are doing something wrong. When we are scared, it is easy to respond with blame, to react to crises with panic and projection and rejection. That is easy. It's easy to look to others when we're uncertain, to expect them to figure it out for us, for solutions. But the catch is this: the only people we can control is ourselves. So we have to turn to our core values. And the challenge is, we live in a world, blessedly, where we don't all necessarily have the same core values. One of the core principles of our tradition is that we honor people coming from different locations. So what do we do? What do we do? All of the speakers yesterday spoke about how important it is to not let crisis sow division. So how do we do that now? What does that mean for us? For us, in our tradition, we say that we have 7 core principles that we hold to. And they are these: honoring the inherent worth and dignity of every person, working for justice, equity, and compassion in human relations, acceptance of one another, and encouragement to spiritual growth in our congregations, supporting a free and responsible search for truth and meaning, upholding the right of conscience and the use of the democratic process within our congregations and society at large, prioritizing the goal of world community with peace, liberty, and justice for all, and respecting the interdependent web of all existence of which we are a part. Now, ultimately, all we can do is our best, right? And the only person whose very best we can control is our own. It's a waste of time and energy to focus on what other people are doing or not doing. Of course, we can and should advocate and fight for change. We can take concrete steps to create justice, but it's a waste of time to sit around talking about what others should or should not do. Instead, let's live our values by doing what we can do. Those who have gone before us and those who will come after us deserve this from us. So today and every day, let us ask ourselves, not are other people living up to my values, but am I living up to my values? What can I do to honor my values more fully today? We can and should grieve and feel angry and upset about what's happening around us because we are in a crisis. And ignoring those feelings leads us to divisiveness. So we can and should grieve and feel angry. And we can and should reflect and analyze to help us make good decisions as individuals and together as a community. But then maybe it would be helpful if we could stop ruminating on everything that's wrong. And maybe, like Thomas Paine suggests, allow our minds and habits to grow firmer through this. Let us perhaps, as Abraham Lincoln urged, dedicate ourselves to the task before us. Let us take actions that within the spheres where we do have influence, where we do have the capacity to make change, let's take those actions. Now, as I said, these are the times that try men's souls. That phrase has been used all over the place, over and over again. So the 1990s rock band Foo Fighters, compliments here to Brad, who reminded me of this song. Foo Fighters used this as the chorus of one of their songs. They said, "It's times like these you learn to live again. It's times like these you give and give again. It's times like these you learn to love again. It's times like these, time and time again." So maybe we can just allow ourselves to feel the grief of the crises we have experienced personally, collectively. Feel the uncertainty, feel the fear, feel the anger, and then commit ourselves to stepping up out of that, to moving up out of that into ways that we can move our values forward. May it be so. There is always more that is possible. It takes courage and commitment to do the things that are hard to do. And we're not always going to be able to do the hard thing. So how do we get the strength to do the courageous thing? We don't do it alone. We do it together. The chalice, which has already blown itself out, because it always does in the strong winds of being outdoors, we'll blow this one out. The chalice is a symbol of the community being a place where it is safe to be afraid and upset and scared and angry. It is a symbol of the community being a place where we remind each other and help each other remember to live our values. And it is a symbol that there's always hope, that there's always passion, that there's always possibility. So when we extinguish the chalice, when we blow that flame out, we carry it with us, knowing that this community is meant to be a place where we can do all those things. Go in peace, go in courage, and go in hope.